Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am joined by a man I think a lot of folks would call the marketing ninja. That's what he wants to be known as,
Oh God.
Mr. Michael Buckbee. How are you doing today, Mike?
Um, Not feeling very ninja-y. I don't think I really like that term, but yeah, that's I think the term marketing ninja is too markety for me to enjoy. But yes, so
I I think Mike can be best described as everyone's best friend, giving them great advice behind closed doors. Because a number of friends that we have in common, I'll listen to their podcast and they'll say, well, we were talking to our mutual friend. And I know that the mutual friend is usually Mike Buckbee, and they're getting great advice on how to do some sort of content marketing with their different companies. So I am glad to have you on the podcast, Mike. And let's start for everyone out there in podcast land who does not have the opportunity to have lunch with you every week.
are we starting?
Tell
Is
us.
this where we announce the coastal barbecue tour that we're going to be going
Yeah,
on?
that's not
Oh,
public yet. We're getting to that.
okay.
But let's start with just tell us your origin story, Mike. Where do you come from? How'd you get into tech? And what have you been doing for the past several years?
Well, I'm from small town Ohio. I grew up in a small town in fairly rural Ohio. And my dad made the tremendous investment decision to buy an Apple IIe computer when I was a kid. And I literally grew up with my dad typing in programs to the Apple IIe out of magazines. And yeah, that was my introduction to tech. So incredibly grateful to my parents for being that far thinking. Because they really did. They bought it as an investment, thinking that this would be helpful to kids. And it was to me. My sister went into pharmacy, so that was a bit of a failure. But, good enough for at least 1 out of 2 isn't bad. And, I got a degree in corporate finance, but I've always been very entrepreneurial in terms of like what I wanted to do. I worked for an agency, doing various consulting stuff in Ohio. Eventually that went under. I got a job at a software startup that was doing handheld software for the military. And then the military happened to be here in Virginia Beach, where we're at. So I moved to Virginia Beach, and I've been here ever since, working remotely, really for different companies, at doing project management, doing software development, doing all sorts of different stuff.
How do you even go for a corporate finance degree? Like, does that pop up as a thing to get an education in?
Um, I'm always I'm always fascinated by like the real world intersection of all these different things. Like, so out of all the business stuff, the corporate finance is really centered around cash flow and really running a business in a way that accounting, which is historical, there's some strategic aspects to it, but mostly historical. And I thought marketing, honestly, was way too fluffy of a job. I didn't think I could get a job with it. And trying to be practical. Um, yeah. And so, sort of the default out of all of that was a sort of generic business degree of corporate finance, at least at the college I went to, which was University of Akron, which has a business school, but it's not Wharton. Yeah. So,
How do you think that's helped you kind of career wise? Because you didn't really go down that path, it seems. But has any of that degree helped you in what you've been doing since then?
I think all of it's helpful. I and I don't know how different it would really be. Like we have friends who have accounting degrees and have done good, and certainly know marketing people that have been in this stuff. Um, I think the the bigger mix is the Venn diagram strategy of I'm a self taught developer, and that's really how I paid for school. Is I started working in a computer lab and learned things, and eventually started picking up small programming things, and then that got bigger and bigger as time went on. But the ability to mix that with just a general business sense is something I think is useful at least it's been useful to me. I think that's useful to other people. I don't really have ambitions to start a podcast, but if I did, I think it would be just examining different business models, like what makes these businesses tick, like how do they fit together? Because I do think that is really fascinating, just innately. Like even businesses I don't really want to run, but restaurants or car washes or any of these sort of things. Like I think it's fascinating how they're put together and stuff. Yeah.
Always look at a large business and let's pick a large business. I always wonder, how does the person at the top, say the C-suite, what do those folks do in a given day? And I still don't even know if I can answer that question intelligently. I know from a smaller business perspective, if I was the owner, a director level of a 10-person company, I know those folks are engaged, making decisions. But when you have say like an Amazon, for example,
Yeah.
or a McDonald's, for example, what does a C-level at one of those companies do day to day? They seem busy. They're making the money, but I still have absolutely no idea what they do in any given day.
So I've had some exposure to that. I haven't run that, but I've been in close working conditions with CEOs at companies, in the range from like a couple hundred people to several thousand people. And in the technology sector, most of what they do is sales. And now some of that is like the big enterprise sales, because it really does mean something that the CEO has flown down to see this potential strategic customer, or that they're there at the conference and they're talking, meeting with customers and prospects. There's a lot of that, but also they do sales to their investors, to the board, to the marketing team, and they're just corralling everyone to do this. But as far as like their individual contribution, they can take certain swings at the bat, and mostly that is for sales. Yeah.
And that brings in the money and that keeps everyone fed. And so it's somewhat important job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch tracks a little, because you are very well known for all the types of businesses you have started on the side. Can you kind of give us a glimpse into your first side business and maybe a little bit of history of the side businesses you've started?
Yeah. So this is mostly a litany of failures. And I think they're failures from I'd say a direct monetary standpoint, but in a lot of ways they're strategic failures. And by strategic, I mean either there's something I created that was public that, still I can use as a tool for other things, or it's something that was created so I could learn something, that if I need to teach myself something, I'm not just doing it in abstract, it's public. And, a lot of times these are sort of assets. A metaphor I really like from like the 30 by 500 people, Alex Hillman and Amy Hoy and that group of people, is stacking the bricks. I think that's a wonderful metaphor where, you're making progress towards something, you're trying to build, a career of something. And, I really sort of lamented, I think, all of these struggles with these different things, and was worried about all of them. And it was a friend who said like, well, all of those have been an issue, but in the larger Mike project of your life, you've actually done pretty well. And so the Mike project is going good. Maybe these little smaller pieces within it. And I think that's both, that helps with my mental stability and anxiety, as well as I think, better positions me to take more risks going forward.
So, can you give us a little overview of some of the things you've started
Sure.
and eventually maybe given up?
At one point, I was very interested in making not really a learning system, because there's a lot of LMSs, but I had created a system of building questions and answers for like studying for like the CISSP exam, which was a security certification that I had at one point and let lapse. Because again, weird career. And and so, studying for the CISSP, I made my own study bank and did all this stuff, and then was trying and failing to really sell this as a product. But, I had done all the work to make it a web app and an iOS app and an Android app. And honestly, looking back, I spent way too much time on the technology and not nearly enough time on the selling and marketing and doing all of that. And I've had a bunch of other smaller SaaS businesses, either that I was a co-founder for or that I, um, started myself. There was one that was for conferences to build like social network per conference, which worked somewhat, but people still mostly got on Twitter or Instagram. So it wasn't a huge hit. There's another one that was linking Salesforce data with LinkedIn data through a Chrome extension. Neither of those companies were real keen on me doing that. And so, yeah, there were issues with that. Not great. Other things, I built like an A/B testing service that was, I think, too technical for the audience. It was just a mismatch. Like the people that really wanted to do that did that through a very sophisticated graphical means, but not through what I wanted to do. It wasn't enough to have a slightly better algorithm under it. It really needed a better UX. I had a 3D printing service called Fabjectory. They got a lot of press, but it was also a lot of manual work. It was more a productized service, which was printing figures from the Second Life game platform and, Mies and things. Got a lot of press. I was in like Wired Magazine and the New York Times, but only made tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of stress. Gave that up. I think as I've done more of these and matured, we had talked before about having a little framework for like, and this isn't to say like ideas are bad. And I think this is a real trap because a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll be like, Mike, I've got this great idea and I know this will work because I saw over there, those people made something similar work. So it's more a difficulty, framework than it is like, no, this won't work. And it's taking three factors into account. And what you're trying to do is push your idea to be more to one side of all three of these than it is the other. So the more B2B the idea is and the less B2C, the more successful or again, the easier it will be to get off the ground because people are reluctant to spend their own money, but businesses happy to pay money to kill problems all day. The other is how painful it is. If it's a more painful problem than a less painful problem, certainly people will pay more money for it. And the last is DIY to DFY. DIY, we know, but DFY is done for you. So the more done for you you can make the service, the better. So where I started having success in terms of, things outside my job was really in the Heroku Add-ons marketplace. I guess technically it's the Elements marketplace. We're now the Salesforce Elements marketplace for Heroku Platform Cloud, something or other.
Ultimate Edition.
Ultimate Edition, Platinum, trademark. Yeah. And so I was one of the first add-ons in there to use the platform API when it was still in beta for Heroku. And what I had established was a means of automatically installing SSL TLS certificates on behalf of, sites. So would take care of that for them. And as a consultant, I had done that for clients. And at the time, it was so painful. It would take like a couple hours. Maybe you'd mess it up. Maybe the site would go down. It was just a hassle. And so I made it, bulletproof, repeatable, and it ticked all those boxes. So this is something businesses cared about, especially at the time. This is, early 2014, something like that. It's a painful issue. People are already paying to solve. And I automated it to like, you just click through this wizard and it just takes care of it. So, and that was one of my first successes outside of my job work. And then I've done some more Heroku add-ons since then.
I think people really need to realize when you were doing Expedite SSL, things like Let's Encrypt didn't exist yet. Yeah, so you were primarily responsible for buying your own certificate, installing it on your server, configuring it correctly. Hopefully you bought the right one for the right domain, and hopefully
use the
you
right
didn't screw up anything in the configuration.
certificates and like the right format, and you didn't accidentally get a carriage return line feed at the end of it that made it not. Yeah.
So there was a list of things that could potentially go wrong in the process. And if you're using a platform like Heroku, for example, you, to an extent, are kind of expecting things to be done for you. You're renting the space and you have the nice, let's say, UI infrastructure on top of it, and then that was a lacking feature, that you came in and filled the gap, and people kind of flocked to that because it was
Yeah.
solving a need that folks on that
Well, Heroku is
infrastructure
a
were.
platform as a service. And I think this is outside the framework stuff, but it's something that like makes a lot more sense there than I think at you're getting a virtual private server, you're trying to set it up manually. Doesn't make as much sense. I mean, there were other products for that. Yeah.
So I know you had other success on the marketplace. One of the things that you kind of push, and I've seen you do this in a variety of different ways, is what you call content engineering.
Yeah.
Uh, and I know we had a discussion about this earlier. We've talked about this over lunch and coffee so many times, but traditionally developers are very, what's the best word? They hate being marketed to.
Yeah.
And if anyone comes at them from a direction of marketing, even glimpsing towards buy my stuff, they tend to cower and say something nasty. You have done a good job of figuring out ways to get around that. And I would love for you to talk about content engineering kind of in general, and maybe some things you've done to facilitate that.
I think before I want to talk about the developers and marketing and the relationship with marketing, you know, I don't think developers hate marketing as much as we think we do. I mean, certainly there's a strain of that. Um, I think what we all hate, myself included, is, inauthentic and like really badly targeted, you know, things. And and there's a much broader thing here than I think just ads, which is sort of the marketing thing. This is even stuff like the recruiters who like send you the emails with the requirements that are just like lunacy. Um, like that's an example of like it's inauthentic. They obviously don't know what they're talking about. And certainly, it's off target, you know. So the content engineering stuff is really just building tools that are helpful to people. So then they want to use them to do things instead of writing more blog posts or doing other stuff. So one of the things I made was this was for a Ruby and Rails meetup here that was local was forgoodstrftime.com. If you're a developer, you do strf time formatting for dates. It makes it real simple to do that and copy and paste and build your own and stuff. And I built that like 10 plus years ago and still have it up. It's one of my bricks for things. And, occasionally I refresh it or, put a different like, hey, if you like this, check out one of my other projects on it. And that's the sort of thing where, is that marketing exactly? I don't know. It's a helpful thing. It says, follow me on Twitter, or if you like this, go look at one of my other projects. But it's not, it's self-selecting. It's not in people's faces. And I built other things like that for other groups and different things.
Well, there's other businesses you've had where you've done that to an extent. If we go back to Expedite SSL, didn't you have a SSL checker that
Yeah.
would essentially check your site and make sure you weren't vulnerable to hard bleed or any of the bad SSL things?
Yeah. So I had done that. I had done some of those very specific checks for those kind of things, as well as like a general scanner for stuff. Those were somewhat successful. I think there's limits to some of this. Like I've certainly done traditional advertising as well. The other piece of this that I think falls under marketing and sales is I am much less afraid of talking to people than
Yeah.
maybe other developers running like, development SaaS is like, I really get a lot of satisfaction out of it because especially with my projects now, which are much more security focused, it's so much more helpful to people. And they're so happy to actually talk to someone who, has a little bit of expertise in this and that, is really trying to solve their problems and isn't trying to just like, yeah, this magic thing will just fix all of your issues.
So in running your Heroku add-on empire, you were working a full-time job at the time.
Yeah.
And from an outsider perspective, you're kicking butt in both places. eventually you left that job to go full
Yeah.
time on your own projects. Talk to us a little bit about the lead up to quitting the W-2. I feel like that's every time we talk to someone who's quit a W-2 to go off and do their own thing, it's sometimes very anticlimactic. It's just, oh, one day I have a full time job, one day I don't have a full time job.
Yeah.
Uh, let's talk about for you, how do you give up that security of the W-2 to go all in on your own projects?
So there's a couple of things. I think getting into this, like before I started, one of the things I did was I got an IP exclusion agreement as part of my hire there, which said like I have these Heroku things. They are security related. It was enterprise security company I was working at as a marketing manager. And so it wasn't competitive. It wasn't something they were doing, but I had previously worked for 3M. 3M has the world's most onerous IP assignment rules in the world. Like literally we joke like, oh, if you like made a coffee table, they would own that coffee table because like how restrictive their IP covenants work. So it's something I was really sensitive to and, wanted to be, I always want to just be honest and straightforward with people. And so that was one of the things. And the other is, working remote. I think there's a lot of like people being overemployed and stuff. And I'm sensitive to like, it was never that really for me, mostly because again, everything's automated. So there's very little interaction. And eventually with that stuff, I ended up hiring a friend as a contractor to just deal with stuff for me. So I never really had to do much actual like day-to-day work on it. It was much more about like, trying to strategize about the business and like how to do things and stuff like that. So, and so I'm sorry, you asked a question and I took it a whole different way. You asked how I was leaving. Um, I was really upset to leave the job. Like, I don't think I do well with change and I think I am very risk averse. Um, so it took, multiple other add-ons and having, significantly more than I was actually making at the full-time job to quit. And it was emotional. It felt like a breakup. And in part, you know, I'd worked there like 9 years. And so, just the routine of it, I feel like maybe I'm still coming out of 6 months later. But yeah, so I chose a date basically a week after I had a large vesting event. People have vesting events and seemed like that was a good time. And so after that vesting event, looking at my actual realized income from that job was significantly less. I had spreadsheets to model all this out. So I put in my notice and it was fine. Even though I had worked there a long time and was a senior person on the team and, all this stuff, they were fine without me. I think it was time to go. Yeah.
You touched on what most people probably hear as a throwaway comment is that you had spreadsheets, but you collected an absurd amount of data on how your businesses were doing week after week after week for what I assume was years.
Yeah.
So it wasn't I have this benefit of having known you
Yeah.
for most of this time. So it wasn't a just see of your pants, hey, this vesting's coming up, I'm going to go all in on my things. You already knew from your spreadsheets and the data you've collected that it was pretty likely going to work out just fine. And
Oh, I think that makes it seem a lot more clinical than it actually was. It was much more of an emotional thing. Like, because on paper and the spreadsheets, I could have quit much sooner. It was just, you know, my conservatism and paranoia
yeah,
about these things. Um, yeah. And I've had some ups and downs. Like we mentioned expedited SSL, which was my cert automation business. That is not a viable business anymore, for good reason. Like Let's Encrypt came in and just crushed that as a market. And I think to the benefit of the internet, like to the detriment of me, but the internet is better off with it. So that's good. So then I started expedited web application firewalls, WAF, in the Heroku marketplace, which is done very well. And I had in there also a half dozen other add-ons, putting various APIs in there for different things, mostly around security. And so that's sort of been my niche, has been developer and developer sort of operational security. So, again, stacking the bricks. So these all sort of led into one another, all these different projects.
So you're stacking the bricks is what we call Wafris, the wall that you've built over time. Is that just another brick? We're leading into what you're doing now, obviously.
Yeah. So in terms of income now, I have the Heroku add-ons, which are still going, and even expedited SSL still makes a small amount of money, like, I don't know, a couple $1,000 MRR or something.
Which is another throwaway comment, Mike, like to a lot of folks having a couple extra $1,000 a month is substantial.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean to minimize that. Like, I feel very lucky to be where I'm at with all this stuff. I think maybe that also makes me more conservative, because I feel like it's not like I sat down and like sat in my wizard tower and came up with this amazing idea that then conquered the world. This is much more grinding away at stuff and kind of getting to a place and kind of being at the right place, the right time, and like getting in with stuff. Then I think it is like some brilliance on my part. So it's hard to, and on that basis, it's hard to go like, yeah, I can do this all the time. This is going to be my full-time job, being lucky and finding these niches and doing this stuff. Like,
if anyone can do it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I still have some income from that. The other thing is I had another, failed SaaS startup, which was called SendCheckIt. SendCheckIt was originally meant to be a SaaS that you could send, like, you can go into MailChimp and it's like, send yourself a test email to make sure this is okay. You would put in like Kevin@sendcheckit.com, and then it would check that email, like automated quality assurance. Like, are all the links correct? Are they not broken? Is all this stuff set? And it turns out nobody really wanted that. Like, on my framework scale, that was not a big enough pain for people.
Mm-hmm.
It was business. It was mostly done for you, but it just wasn't painful enough. So that went away, but I had built as a content engineering tool, a subject line checker. And so what I had done was, I don't even know if you know what I did for this, but I subscribed to, I don't even know, like 50,000 different newsletters, and sent them all to one email address that then put them all into a database. And then I did this whole analysis on them. So I basically went out and reverse engineered what all the best newsletters in the world were doing. So I do like all the really expensive ones like Klaviyo and HubSpot and stuff, the people paying, because my assumption was if you're paying $20,000 for email marketing software, you're probably putting a lot of thought and effort into what the subject line is.
Yeah.
And so reverse engineered all that. And so if you go to SendCheckIt and put your subject line in, it really compares it to be what's effective. And turns out that was a good idea, because a bunch of people have done studies since then on like, is this actually true? What's the best subject line checker? And SendCheckIt comes out on the top almost all the time. So that was cool. That was supposed to be a content engineering tool that led into the SaaS. I've never really had anything to sell. So I've tried like a whole bunch of stuff. I tried to write like an ebook and get some people to buy it and stuff. None of that's been terribly effective. The two things that, and this is really just in the last year that I've done with it. There's an API. I started gating the API. Originally it was free. But I started gating it, and then, anyone who wanted access, I just said, well, it's $500 for the year. And so I've had 10 something people, like ask for that and pay it. And they're like, okay. So that's an annual, couple $1,000s from that. And then I started doing, I've never done this before, affiliate sales for, Hoppy Copy. They're an AI, email newsletter service. Like, you can use them to write your stuff for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm making like maybe like 1,000 MRR from that now because it's recurring. They have a really nice affiliate program. So if, someone signs up for their $50 a month plan, I get $25 a month from it for like, I think the first year or so of their plan. So, um, it's pretty small in the scheme of things, but that's the other source of income. So, and again, it's sort of strategic because it's smaller and I can do whatever I want with it. If that makes sense. Like I can try just stuff. And if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't, it's not a big deal. And it's also strategically useful to me for my other businesses like Expedited WAF. Syncheckit is the major site that I use to demo because, of course, very worried about data security, don't want to show like a real customer stuff. But it does have an API, so it gets all sorts of weird abuse. It is email, so people do just stupid things with it constantly. So it's a great site to show like attacks and how to stop them and things. So
So it leads you into your new venture,
yeah,
Wafris.
Wafris. Yeah. A lot of controversy on how to say the name, but it's WAF, like Web Application Firewall plus Redis. Um, and so the existing service I have, Expedited WAF, is very much a traditional enterprise web application firewall. It's pretty expensive, probably not something you would use for hobby sites and things. Um, and that's a real frustration because I have lots of these calls with people that are like, I am being destroyed by this, attack. And like literally people like other developers like us. And their sites are just, under attack. They've been up forever. They're just, it's just horrible. And so, Wafris is an attempt to counter all of the bots, all of the script kiddies, all the malware that's out there on the internet, where all these things are attacking everyone's sites constantly. And there isn't a really good default response in the web frameworks. A default tool that you just put on, you don't think about too much, and it just deals with all of these. And that's what Wafris is meant to be. It's sort of a bottom-up web application firewall that lives in your app framework and protects your site from all these, dark traffic, bad things that can happen to it. So
And having seen a couple demos myself, I'll say for any developer out there who's ever had to deal with that, Wafris is definitely a very well done solution, and it's cross platform. So it doesn't matter if you're on Rails or if you're running PHP, Laravel, or hopefully soon .NET. I heard if the guy would write the add-on for the .NET package.
well, I don't know if this, but before any of the .NET frameworks, we're probably going to have traffic, the load balancing, reverse proxy, and Caddy up. I don't know if you're using either of those for your stuff or
No,
no.
no,
All right, well,
no, I'm boring.
I could hope so, but yeah, those are in progress. So,
Well,
but
that's a lot, Mike, and I feel like as a person who's known you for a long time, I'm just kind of in awe and all the cool things you have done, and I enjoy having conversations like this with you.
it sounds like a lot, but like I'm not even sure that's like one project a year. This is the stacking the bricks. This is the beauty of it is, we're in an industry as software developers where it is uncredentialed that, there's not really, uh, it, I joked about my sister being a pharmacist. She had to go through like actual boards and, can lose her license. And there's things in that because she deals with very, um, she doesn't even do pharmacy. She does like kids experimental research pharmacy stuff, like things
Okay.
you don't want to mess up, things that can really positively impact people's lives. That is a credentialed career. We don't have that. And as part of what she does a lot of like reading of research papers. I've worked with a lot of doctors. Doctors have, you know, they have sessions where they do nothing but just go through research papers. They have to take continuing education. They have to do all this stuff. A lot of these side projects are my continuing education, where this is how I'm learning new skills. This is how I'm trying to keep up to date on things and this. And if you think about it in that respect, like it's kind of a deal that
Yeah.
if I get paid anything from these side projects, maybe it takes off, maybe it doesn't, but it's still worthwhile to me because it feeds back into everything else. Mhm.
You're taking it a step further than I think a normal developer would, and you're thinking about the how do I monetize this? How could I make money on this? And that's that's paid off in a couple instances. Whereas a traditional developer who is trying to do something, they're not thinking about how to make money on it. They're just thinking, oh, I get to use this cool tech. And here I'm
Yeah.
doing a tech demo. And it's always very secondary or third in mind of, oh, this could make money. How do I make money on this? And then
I
by then things have failed.
I still struggle with that. Like there's like I love the figuring out, you know, and a lot of these I have stalled out after the figuring out. Like for expedited SSL, I figured it out how to make like everything work at like the command line, and then just got busy and didn't do anything with it for I think like 5 or 6 months. Like just didn't do anything with it. And it was only through like a call with like a Heroku salesperson, like I think an account exec there who called really to like kind of sell me on it. And I was like, well, I'm actually working on this thing. And he was so positive on it. He encouraged me to like pursue it. He's like, you should do this because I talk to Heroku customers all day and they would love this. I'm like, well, heck yeah, I should. So, like that, similar with expedited WAF, like it took too long to get up and going. Um, and maybe with Wafris too, we're pushing real hard at it. I'm getting better, but I think it's a real temptation, and maybe that's even a good thing to tell yourself when you're starting the project. Like, is this something you're actually trying to build to make money, to at least like take that swing, or is it something you're trying to make as a show project for sort of your portfolio to say like, yeah, I made this, and I think if you mix those two, that's kind of a bad idea. But going in with clear eyes is never a bad option. So
Before we wrap up, I really want you to talk about your recent visit to RailsWorld
okay,
in Amsterdam because you're like I've said it before, you're the marketing ninja and you think about this stuff I think way differently than a traditional marketer would. So, let's talk about you took Wafris to RailsWorld and you did some unique things that I don't think any other vendor at RailsWorld did. Can you tell
sure.
us about that?
Um, yeah. So I think maybe the starting place is I think talking to other developers is great. I think that is legitimately a good time and something I enjoy. And if that's not the case for you, this is not what you should be doing. In terms of what I'm about to say, there's lots of other marketing stuff that, you can write articles, you can do other things, but um, I was I was delighted to fly to Amsterdam and spend the time as you do in Amsterdam, talking to several hundred software developers. The highlight of the trip. So, so, um, I, so I wrote up a whole piece about this and sort of like how we decided to go and things. But strategically, I think this put us a year ahead. Like this accelerated Wafris's growth a year, at least, by going to this. And so there's sort of a calculation of like, is this worthwhile? Is it not? So Wafris is this web application firewall. It works based off Redis. Our first production client is for Rails because my co-founder and I, Ryan Castillo, both of us are traditionally Rails developers, though we both know other languages. So went to RailsWorld, and I think the big thing we decided was, well, we can't just go. If we just go and have like a rinky dink booth, this is going to be a failure because people are going to wander up and kind of go like, why, what is this? These just two random people. So the starting point was, how do we get people to the booth? And so we reached out to the conference organizers and we talked to them, and what we lack in funds and what we lack in like a huge marketing team, we made up with arts and crafts. And so what we did was we got these, I'll put them up here, but these are stickers that went on little envelopes for an icebreaker. And so, some can see them for the video, but it was instructions to open up this little envelope that had these different cards in it we called Code for Insanity. And so these are sort of like Cards Against Humanity cards, but for developers. So there was one black card and two white cards in it. And the instructions were basically go and make, new friends with people, ask them what cards they had and mix and match. It's kind of a fun thing. And then the last item on the sticker was instructions that, hey, stop by the Wafris booth and you can get a full pack of the cards. So we had, I think, maybe 20% of the conference, like 600 people stop by the booth. And so that was step one, is how to get people to the booth. And step two was, how can we get emails from people to, show them a demo, get their email address, follow up with them, do those kind of things. So we never want to, just asking for it is weird. So what we did was DHH, who's the founder of Rails, the framework, has a Pagani Zonda HH sports car. The HH stands for Hannemeyer Hansen, his last name. It is his model car that he bought from all of his work at Basecamp and all the money he's made. And he races cars and things. So we hired a Lego artist in Amsterdam who makes high-end Lego cars custom for these things. So he made his very specific car out of Legos. And this thing is big. It was like over a foot long, maybe 8 inches wide, and modeled the front and back of it open and stuff. We had it in like a little display case because it was delicate. It's a Lego sculpture. It's not really a toy. And so we had 2 of those made, one to give to him and one to give away. And so, yeah. And so that was our thing. So we had stickers, and then you wrote your email address on the back of the sticker to be entered in the contest to win this cool Lego car. And then on it, you wrote demo if you wanted us to follow up and ask for a demo. And we had a drawing. We gave it to a nice guy. It turned out he was a big F1 fan and really into racing, which I thought was nice. And so we were able to get, a lot of contacts from that and, really move that forward now. And the last week has been nothing but trying to follow up with people, trying to get people in and use the software and things. And so we had, literally, my voice is still kind of messed up from it. I spoke so much, but literally hundreds of demos of the application to people and so much feedback and so much, goodwill and encouragement. It was great. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you talked to us at our regular lunches about this, and I thought it was a good idea then, and I'm glad to hear that you guys had success from it, because I've been on the other side of the spectrum as the cheesy marketer, developer relations guy at a table, just trying to get people to drop a business card in for a chance to win some random Lego that we picked up in whatever city we're in. I feel like it's more personal though what you guys did. You were probably able to interact with way more folks. They didn't come in with the guard on. And as we talked about before, a lot of developers are just kind of, they want to shield themselves from the marketing spiel. And I think your approach made it more approachable.
Well, again, it's, I'm an actual software developer.
Yeah. I'm one of you, not in disguise.
Wafris is a business founded out of the pains of all of this. Really the literal pains that I have seen other developers have. And it's really angered me. I joke about this, a lot of people make open source out of hope and working together and positivity. I'm no, this is anger and revenge for me. I hate these people that are destroying these sites and making our lives miserable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hateware. So that's our tagline. Wafris is hateware. So yeah.
Good podcast title.
But it's all the Code for Insanity, the deck of cards. I wrote these. They're all developer inside jokes about commit messages and stuff and things. And all of our work is kind of fits in with that. So yeah.
Well, Mike, if there's someone out there listening that says, I want to be just like Mike Buckbee, what is a piece of advice you might have for that person?
I certainly think people should try more stuff, and I think they should try it in a public way. smaller, more frequent bets, more stuff you can publish, more stuff you can point to, stack more bricks, I think is a great philosophy. I think also, you know, again, with the developers hate marketing, I think is overblown. I think they hate the bad stuff. I think you should have real conversations with people. Uh, I think those are invaluable. I don't know. Have you had Adam McRae on yet?
No,
So
not yet.
I'll spoil a story for Adam. So Adam does not share my optimism about the developers and marketing, but so he sent an email address. He runs Judo Scale, which is an
Okay.
auto scaling service that works in like Render and Heroku and AWS now. And he is so reluctant to do marketing stuff, but he sent an email to his group and like all of his users, just like asking for some real basic feedback. And the whole thing was couched like, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know this is a huge imposition on your time. If you want to unsubscribe, just click this unsubscribe button right at the top. But if you could just spend a few minutes, maybe just give me some feedback. And I think like he got several hundred responses. Like he got enough responses. I think he had to like shut his phone off that it was beeping so much. He got so many email responses from this in return. And it's because he is an awesome developer. He is incredibly authentic with his work. He makes a useful tool that people like and that helps them. And like, of course, people would respond like, thank you for making this. I would like to see this other thing. Like, so yeah, talk to more people, make more stuff public. And I love talking about this stuff. So if people want to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm at mbuckbee. If you want to see Wafris, I'll talk to you about Wafris. We can talk about this. Yeah, but would love to see more developers do more marketing stuff and have more success.
Well, Mike, thank you for being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. I wish we had more time, but now we have to have you back in a year or so, and we'll see where Wafris is. And
I quit my
we'll talk
job,
about
Kevin.
all the
I'm
things we didn't
self-employed.
talk
I
about
can keep
today.
talking. I can go as long as you want.
Well, we'll do part 2.
Part 2.
Put it on the
Okay.
calendar. All right, Mike. Thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next time.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Multithreaded Income Podcast. I've been your host, Kevin Griffin. Please reach out to us on social media at MT Income, wherever you get your socials from. And feel free to join one of our upcoming challenges at multithreadedincome.com. We'll see you next time.